Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, a familiar call for capital punishment, how the tourism minister feels about crime, and a former athlete honored 50 years after his gold medal. Welcome to our news. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight, Tall Pines MP Leslie Miller is calling for capital punishment in the wake of several murders. It's not the first time Miller has made the call. However, he said it's as if his previous calls have fallen on deaf ears. Jasmine Brown reports.
Miller says it's clear that more needs to be done to curb crime and clamp down on murders. The answer, he says, is ensuring capital punishment is carried out.
That is so simple for us to impose the death penalty. It is so simple.
Miller has been critical of how both the PLP and FNM have handled crime. Earlier this week, National Security Minister Bernard Nodded said he was pleased crime was down compared to recent years. But Miller says the fear of crime is still very much alive and well. Miller says it appears the government is distracted by other trivial matters.
What kind of country we have? This is a lawless country. And we need to deal with those matters that affect the daily lives of the average Bahamian instead of dealing with foolishness. That's what we need to do. That's what they sent us here for. Deal with what affects my life in a negative way and make it positive for my children and myself.
In 2014, Prime Minister Perry Christie said government will give the issue of capital punishment serious consideration. However, the issue has been off the government's radar, and that's not sitting well with Miller.
They are devoid of a conscience. They are devoid of compassion, and they should not be among civilized people. The penalty says there should be death, and I don't understand why this parliament and why this government refused to implement the laws of our country. It bothers me greatly. As a parent and as a Bahamian, they're the times we need to deal with.
The last time capital punishment was carried out in the Bahamas was on January 6, 2000, when David Mitchell was hanged. Reporting for RN News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Thanks, Jasmine. Well, Tourism Minister Obi Wolscombe said he believes that all Bahamians should take the blame for the country's unacceptable levels of crime, which have sparked repeated visitor warnings. Wolscombe said while the tourism industry continues to grow, the repeated advisories issued by other countries will eventually impact the success of the country's #1 industry. He was also adamant that while violent crimes are a challenge, the Bahamas has the lowest levels of incidents involving tourists.
I think the Bahamian people should see it as flack for all of us because our nation is being poorly, in my view, defined because of circumstances, situations that being executed by a few people. The truth is we have to deal with the issue, which means that our war on crime must be a very strong war, a continuous and deliberate war, very focused.
Despite Canada's recent travel warning, Wolscombe said the Bahamas continues to have a good response from visitors in that region.
Our tourism industry is growing. We're having a tremendous response from the Canadian market, tremendous response from the United States market and other markets around the world. We are rebuilding from the period of the recession, and so we've had sustainable growth. We want to accelerate the growth, but to do so, we have to eliminate some of the negatives that we have, and one of which is crime.
Meanwhile, during his budget communication yesterday, St. Anne's MP Hubert Chipman slammed the government for its inability to get a handle on crime. He said despite the government's promise to deal with the issue, the country is no safer now than it was 4 years ago when the PLP took office.
Crime warnings have an impact. You don't see it immediately, but you begin to recognize that you create a level of hesitant, and the visitor is hesitant, and some are having difficulties even promoting the Bahamas and destinations that face such circumstances. But what we seek to do in all circumstances is our teams that are around the world, they are resilient and diligent, and they are working, getting the message out about the crime, because when it relates to the visitor, the truth is we're very, very low, one of the lowest in the world.
So, does the Bahamas need outside help to fix the vexing crime problem?
I don't think so. I don't think we need help from the outside. I have confidence in the Bahamian people. I think that there's nothing we can't solve. We just have to, sometimes in the midst of what you're doing, you pause, look at what you're doing, and determine how you're going to deal with it.
Amid much debate over the level of crime in the country, especially among young men, Director of the Shock Treatment Program and CEO of the Hope Center, Pastor Carlos Reed, said during his research of gangs in the Bahamas that he discovered that male students are often recruited by gang members because they are easily influenced.
Schools have become the breeding ground for gangs. We are doing a lot of work in the school. Anytime you go into school and you ask who all in gangs, you see the amount of students that raise their hand.
Reed said he is currently in talks with the Ministry of National Security to continue building and strengthening youth against violence programs.
This is why, like our efforts with Youth Against Violence in the Ministry of National Security, we've been focusing on how do we send a clear message in our schools that gangs are not the solution.
Well, another round of public consultations for the proposed Freedom of Information Act is scheduled to take place next week in a push to have Bahamians' voices heard. The Freedom of Information bill would allow Bahamians to request any document, record, or information held by the government in a move to promote greater accountability, transparency, and democracy in the country. Meetings are scheduled for Monday, June 20th on New Providence and June 21st on Exuma. Organizers are encouraging members of the public to come out and learn what the bill would and should cover before the bill moves in Parliament.